Welcome to How to Kill a Bill, the podcast where bad bills go to die. I'm your host, Sunshine Moore Anger, and on today's episode, we're going to go through 15 of the most common ways to kill a bill. Because after all, that's the name of our show. As always, if you have a funny, shady, or interesting story you'd like to share, please reach out in the comments. Visit howtokillabill.com or email us at contact@howtokillabill.com. And maybe you can be a guest on a future episode. Don't forget to like, share, follow, and subscribe so you never miss new content. We're a fledgling podcast, and the only way to grow our audience is if listeners like you help spread the word. On our last episode, we explained how a bill becomes a law. If you haven't listened to it yet, go back and listen, if for no other reason than to find out what a Frankenstein veto is. So as we discussed, there are many steps in the process before a bill becomes a law. And in that process, there are many, many opportunities for the bill to die or get amended into something slightly different or even something completely different than the original idea. According to the Emory Law Library, only about 6% of the 10,000 to 20,000 bills introduced by Congress each session ever get enacted into law. At the state level, it varies widely. I've read that state legislatures are much more productive, with as many as 20% of all bills eventually becoming law. But the point is, the vast majority of bills never become law. They die for a whole host of reasons that we're going to talk about in the coming weeks. So when you think about lobbying, many times the assignment isn't to get something passed, it's to get something killed. Corporations and special interest groups often don't like change, and so the majority of a lobbyist's time is spent making sure bills do not become laws. And today, we're going to list some of the most common ways to kill a bill. I'd love to hear from our listeners if you've seen these techniques in action or what may be missing from the list. In no particular order, number 1, run out the clock. This is where you use parliamentary procedure to your advantage to stall, delay, or otherwise tie up the negotiations on a bill for so long that there's no possible way for the bill to pass each of the respective steps before the end of the legislative session. For you sports fans out there, you know exactly what running out the clock means. And this can be a very effective strategy when a bill is so bad that there just isn't any way to negotiate the language to anything even remotely acceptable to your client or your side. Number 2, get a poison pill amendment added to the bill. This can be a sentence or a section that gets added to the bill that is so awful that even the bill sponsors or the bill author don't want to see the bill pass. Number 3, get a huge fiscal note put on the bill. When a bill gets referred to a fiscal committee, it means there's some type of cost associated with the bill. And the more you can inflate that number, the less likely it is to pass. Because unlike Congress, state governments have to figure out ways to pay for the things they want to do. Every U.S. state other than Vermont requires a balanced budget, though what exactly a balanced budget means can vary from state to state. Indiana, for example, prohibits the state from going into debt, but has an exception for temporary and casual deficits and no actual balanced budget requirement. So unlike Congress, which can just raise the debt ceiling, state governments, like the rest of us, have to live within their means. And that means legislators either have to raise taxes or impose fees or cut spending somewhere else to pay for new programs and services. Number 4, get someone else to kill the bill for you. In other words, if you don't want to look bad or be seen killing the bill, have a proxy do it for you. This allows you to keep your hands clean and make it look like, hey, I was willing to keep working on this bill, but unfortunately, so-and-so wasn't. That brings us to number 5. Build a coalition. If you can get enough people opposing the bill, especially when you get to use phrases like strange bedfellows, it will make the argument that this bill is so bad that even groups that normally disagree or hate each other can all agree that this piece of legislation is terrible. Number 6, horse trade it for something else. Sometimes you can let some other issue that you're working on go and give it up if it means that you can get this one issue that's a bigger deal killed. So you may negotiate behind closed doors that you're going to remove your opposition on some other piece of legislation if they will stick this bill in a drawer. Number 7, turn it into a study. There are many ways to make the argument that this idea or concept is just not ready for prime time. It's not fully baked, and the state should really take time to study this issue some more. It's a classic stall tactic with states that want to legalize marijuana, for example. We don't know if the revenue we will bring in by taxing it will be enough to offset some of the harms that could come from allowing it. And so we really need to study this some more before we feel comfortable even voting on it. Number 8, get the bill watered down so much that it doesn't really do anything. We've seen this happen so many times with a big, bold idea. And if you can just get the teeth completely written out of the bill, where there's really no enforcement, the regulators don't get to do a whole lot to implement it, or there really aren't any penalties or fines associated with noncompliance, then really it's just a feel good piece of legislation that doesn't really do anything. Number 9, delay the effective date. Sometimes you can make the argument that it's simply too much too soon. It's going to cost a lot of money to implement. You're going to have to hire all these people. You have to set up really complex IT systems or internal operations to comply with the law. And so there's just no way this bill should go into effect on January 1, which is when most bills take effect. And so you may be able to delay the effective date to January 1 of the following year, or in 2 years, or in 3 years. And that gives your time side to then, in the following years, go get that bill repealed or turned into something else or amended to your satisfaction. Number 10, get the governor, the president, or the mayor of DC to threaten to veto the bill. That can often squash a bill in its tracks because the legislature shouldn't be spending time working on and whipping the votes and passing something that the president or the governor has publicly said they will veto if it comes to his or her desk. Number 11, get it held in the Rules Committee. So one of the best ways to kill a bill is to never let it see the light of day. Never let it get scheduled for a vote. Stick it in a drawer, as they say. So just because a legislator introduces a bill, it doesn't mean the bill will automatically get a hearing date. We didn't talk about this in episode 1, but before a bill even gets assigned to its first policy committee, the Rules Committee has to decide which committee it should go to and which type of special rules apply to the bill. So you've heard me mention several times that some bills have to go to a fiscal committee as an extra step in the process. And the Rules Committee looks at whether the bill qualifies as something that would cost the state money. In Congress, bills that pass their policy committee also don't automatically go to the House floor. They have to go back through the Rules Committee, which can, if it decides to, hold the bill and never schedule it for a vote. So the Rules Committee is very powerful, both at the federal and state level, and you can often get a bill killed if you can convince the chair of the Rules Committee not to let it out. Number 12, have the Rules Committee refer the bill to multiple policy committees. So if the Rules Committee won't hold the bill, you can try to influence which or how many policy committees it goes to. I've seen bills get double and even triple referred. For example, California Senate Bill 277 from 2015 eliminated personal belief exemptions to mandatory vaccinations for school children, and it got referred to the Education Committee, the Healthcare Committee, and the Judiciary Committee. It also had to pass the Appropriations Committee because it had some type of oversight or enforcement mechanism that was going to cost the state money. So that's 4 committees in one house, plus the floor, and then the same process all over again in the second house, and also concurrence where if it changes, it has to go back to the first house and be voted on again. So getting a bill referred to multiple committees basically throws down a gauntlet with multiple extra steps that the bill has to pass, giving you that many more opportunities to kill the bill along the way. That one, by the way, did not die, and it was pretty impressive to see how many hoops that bill had to jump through before it reached the governor's desk, which he then signed. Number 13, run a competing piece of legislation. This is really common in states like California that have voter initiatives or ballot measures, where instead of the state legislators deciding, voters get to decide. And if you can run another ballot measure that is very similar, you can confuse the voters into maybe voting no on both because they're not really sure what they do or they don't understand how these two things are different. And that can happen in the legislature as well, where you have 2 bills on similar topics, and you can make the argument that you don't need the same piece of legislation passing in both houses, and you run a competing bill that's more advantageous to your side, getting the other one killed. Number 14 is the slippery slope argument. You can kill a bill by saying, well, this is going to create a slippery slope. You haven't thought this all the way through, and this could set a precedent, and the state is going to regret this if they start going down this path. Or if we do this here, then other states might pass it as well. And we all know that once a bill passes in one state, it can start spreading all over the country. Number 15, and the last one that comes to mind for me, is unintended consequences. If you can make the argument that this bill is going to have all these other side effects, or it's actually going to hurt the people it's supposed to help, then you can sometimes kill or at least get a bill amended. I've seen this happen, for example, where legislators wanted to ban short-term health insurance plans. They call them junk insurance. And so instead of you being able to buy a policy for 90 days and then renew it again for another 90 days and then renew it again, and so basically you're taking what's intended to be just stopgap health insurance. Let's say you're between jobs and your new health insurance hasn't kicked in yet. And so legislators didn't want people buying these junk policies and then finding out it doesn't cover prescription drugs or cancer treatments, and you just didn't realize this wasn't real health insurance. So they said, well, let's pass a law that any health insurance policy sold in this state can't be for less than 365 days. It has to be for at least a year. But what they didn't realize is that in the group market, where big companies are buying health insurance policies for their employees, they sometimes need a policy that's for less than a year because, let's say, they currently renew every year on July 1, which lines up with their fiscal year. But now let's say they want to get all their employees on a January 1 start date because that's just easier to follow the regular calendar. And so they tell their health insurance company, this year, just make it for 6 months from July 1 to December 31. So then in January, we'll renew and we'll make it for a full year. But now, under state law, they're not allowed to sell a 6-month policy. It's illegal. And so while the state legislators thought they were doing this great thing to protect consumers in the individual health insurance market, what they didn't realize is they were making it illegal for everyone, including huge companies who have lots of reasons why they might need a policy for less than 365 days. And so you can use the unintended consequences argument to stop a bill from moving forward or at least slow it down so that we can think through all of these different situations and really figure out what's the best way to write the language in this bill so that it does the thing we want and doesn't do all these other things we didn't intend for it to do. So, what do our listeners think? If you're a current or former lobbyist, policymaker, or staffer, have you ever used these tactics or seen them in action? Were they effective or did they backfire? And which ones have I missed? Please share your reaction to today's episode in the comments below. Visit howtokillabill.com or email us at contact@howtokillabill.com. Don't forget to like, share, follow, and subscribe. And thank you for listening to How to Kill a Bill.